ready for the word? Turn to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, verse 24. And when the messengers of John were departed, Yeshua began to speak unto the people concerning John. What went ye out into the wilderness for to see? A reed shaken with the wind? But what went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they which are gorgeously apparelled and live delicately are in king's courts. But what went ye out for to see? A prophet? Yeah, I say unto you, and much more than a prophet. I have received more than one email, message, or YouTube comment from viewers who have expressed their disapproval of how much time I spent on testing the lunar Sabbath. The last one was, put it lightly, the last one was extremely firm in letting me know there was absolutely no need for me to have spent that much time on that subject. He said that it was becoming wearisome to have to listen to it. And he warned me that if I continued with the subject, he'd stop listening and stop watching. And so there are those out there who think they should be the ones to tell you what to preach, how long you can preach it, and what not to preach. I have no desire to spend as much as 5 seconds defending myself or the testing the lunar Sabbath doctrine. So don't even think that the things I'm about to say are in any way an attempt to defend myself, because I'm not doing that. However, this morning I am going to address his comments and the comments of several others who have expressed the same sentiments. But I'm addressing their comments only because of the wealth of the benefit that is available to us by examining those comments against what the Scriptures teach us. Let me start out with a simple statement that should resonate deeply within anyone who has a deep hunger for truth. So listen to this statement. This is where we're going to start. Any preacher who only preaches what you want to hear is after accolades, applause, attention, acceptance, security, more subscribers, and more views. They're not the servants of Yahweh, they are the servants of men. The hirelings who care nothing for a flock. Preach what you want to hear when you want to hear it. And yet there are multitudes who prefer the preachers who will serve them and yield to their desires and demands. Yet look in 2 Timothy chapter 4. The Bible clearly and firmly warns us about this kind of an attitude. Second Timothy chapter 4, look in verse 3. Paul told Timothy, for the time will come. He saw it coming, knew it was coming. It came in their lifetime, it still is in effect today. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. But after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. I think when most people read that, they think it's a condemnation of preachers who preach ear-tickling sermons. But that's not what it is. Not at all. 3 times Paul warned Timothy about they. He said they will not endure. He said they will heap to themselves. He said they will turn away their ears. This text is a condemnation of those who heap to themselves the kind of preachers who will preach to itchy ears. It's a condemnation of the people who demand such preachers. Paul's telling Timothy not to be swayed by them. In verse 2, you can look there, he told Timothy, preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. The best way to understand that phrase is to look at how the Greek words that are used there are used in other places. And when you do that, you will understand Paul was saying to Timothy, preach the word, and preach it when it's convenient, and preach it when it's not convenient. Stand up and preach it whether people want to hear it or not. Then he told Timothy, listen to this. He told Timothy, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering. Reprove, reprove. That word means prove a person wrong. How about that? Preach the word, prove a person wrong. You know what we ought to do? We ought to start making a list that we keep on the wall somewhere, a list of things you'd never hear the Apostle Paul say. I think at the top of the list would be, things you'd never hear the Apostle Paul say would be, well, let's just agree to disagree. He wouldn't say that. He's telling Timothy, preach the word, prove a person wrong. Rebuke. This is the exact same Greek word that is used when we're told that Yeshua rebuked the wind, rebuked the devil, rebuked evil spirits, rebuked sickness. The exact same word. Rebuke means to warn, to forbid, to censor. So Paul is telling Timothy, I want you to do the exact same thing to people who are out of line in their beliefs that Yeshua did to evil spirits. Rebuke them. Now, you're never going to find that kind of instruction in ministerial training classes today. That's a fact. Pastors are not taught that it's their job to study the word, preach the word, reprove and rebuke. But that's what Paul's telling this young pastor Timothy to do. Exhort. That word means to invite them in or invite them over. It means to implore them over into agreement with the Scriptures. The purpose of reproving and rebuking is not to run them off. The purpose is to change the way they're thinking, the way they're acting, and invite them to believe right and think right and behave right. And then it says this, with all long suffering. Now, don't read that and think that it means reprove, rebuke, exhort, and be patient and kind while you're doing it. I think that's what we think it says, but that's not what it says. Reprove, rebuke, exhort, and be patient and kind with people while you're doing it. With all long suffering, that word means have great fortitude. We'd say it in the South, have some intestinal fortitude. In other words, Paul's telling him preaching the word's not going to be easy. Reproving and rebuking is not easy. So he's telling him you're going to need fortitude to do this, but do it anyway and never stop doing it regardless of how it's received. There are multitudes of people out there who, it says, will not endure sound doctrine. Endure means to put up with. They're not going to put up with sound doctrine. Instead, they want preachers who will preach to them what they want to hear. And they want preachers who will stop preaching the things they don't want to hear. Let's say it this way. The moment a person starts demanding a preacher the moment that a person starts demanding that a preacher stop preaching on a subject or demanding that he does preach on a subject, they have demonstrated they prefer a hireling instead of a servant of Yahweh. A servant of Yahweh preaches what he's told to preach by Yahweh. A hireling will preach what he's told to preach by the people. So, I preached a series where we tested the lunar Sabbath doctrine. I did it out of necessity. In order to preach the word, I had to prove people wrong. I had to rebuke, warn people of the danger. I had to exhort, which means implore people to forsake the falsehoods and return to simple obedience to Scripture. And I had to have great fortitude throughout that series because I didn't want to preach on the subject at all. And I wanted to stop about 5 weeks before Yahweh let me stop. But I have to preach what I'm told to preach by Him. So I cannot and I will not take a poll to see what people want to hear. And I will not study YouTube analytics to see what would get the most views. Because, and this is very important, I just need to make it known, I'm not a content creator. I'm a servant of the Creator, but I am not a content creator. I'm not saying that content creators cannot also be servants of Yahweh. Not at all. I'm thankful for some who are masters at putting out content. I'm thankful they serve the Creator. I'm just simply saying that's not my calling to be a content creator. My calling is that of a pastor, and my assignment is different. It seems to me that many are losing sight of what a pastor is, and many are losing their belief that they even need one. It's as if the Hebrew Roots movement wishes to embrace all of the Tanakh, but they want to eliminate Ephesians 5, or for that part, most of what the Apostle Paul wrote. I don't get it. They want to eliminate Ephesians 5 because they find it inconvenient. So go turn there. Okay. Ephesians 5. There are so many in the Hebrew Roots who want to pretend that this is not in their Bibles. It says in verse 11, Ephesians 4, I think. I'm sorry, I said 5. Ephesians 4. Verse 11, and he, Yeshua gave. Yeshua did this. He gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and some teachers. Now get this, understand, I know that not everyone who says they are an apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, or teacher, I know that not everyone who says that was sent by Yeshua as a gift. Some are, we can say it this way, many were not sent by Him. I understand that. But this is very, very important. Some were. You can't get away from this. When Yeshua ascended on high, we're told that He did two very important things. Two. One, He gave us the Ruach HaKodesh. He gave us the Holy Spirit. He sent the Holy Spirit. Said He would, and He did. And the second thing He did was say He gave gifts to the assembly. He gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers. And those He gave them for a specific assignment. So look at that in verse 12. He did not send these gifts and tell them to do a survey and find out what people would like to hear, what they need to hear the most, and just give that to them. He sent them with very specific assignments that He gave to them. Verse 12. He gave these gifts for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of the Messiah. Now, just looking at that in English, it looks like Paul, or in the King James Version, it looks like Paul listed 3 things here that he sent them to do. He sent them for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of the Messiah. But it doesn't take much study to go and look up the 3 words translated for. Sometimes you got to look up the little words too, not just the big ones. And when you look up the word for there, you'll find out that the first for the perfecting of the saints, is pros, the Greek word pros, and that's a preposition of direction. It means to move to something, towards something, forward to something. It's a motion towards something, a preposition denoting motion towards something. The second for and the third for are different. They're translated from the Greek word eis. That's a preposition denoting a point reached. So, in light of that, here's the proper way to understand that verse. Yeshua gave some apostles, some prophets, some pastors, some evangelists, and some teachers, sending them toward the task of perfecting the saints into being a people who can do the work of the ministry, into being people who build up the body of the Messiah. So he sent them with a task of perfecting the saints so that they could become people who do the work of the ministry and build up the body of the Messiah. The assignment from the Messiah for those who he gave is to perfect, and that word means to completely furnish them. Completely furnish my people, he said, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body. So think about how I closed out the last session of our lunar Sabbath doctrine testing. I told you that study was done for the purpose of equipping you to contend for the faith. Let me explain it this way. We now have 12 videos out there on YouTube on testing the lunar Sabbath. 12. The primary purpose of those videos is not so that if you encounter someone who's being lured by this doctrine, you can send them to links to watch those teachings. That's not the primary purpose of them. You certainly can do that, but that's not the purpose. The primary purpose for them is so that you can watch and rewatch them, so that if you encounter someone who is dealing with this doctrine, you can rescue them. Watch them, rewatch them, study them, so that you can do the work of the ministry, so that you can build up the body of the Messiah. Here's the point. It's not enough for you to know what you believe. You have to know why you believe it. Know what you believe and know why you believe it. If you know what you believe but you don't know why you believe it, you haven't spent enough time studying it, thinking on it, meditating on it, searching it out. Yeshua gave the gifts listed in Ephesians 5 so that those who desire to serve him can become completely furnished. And he equips those he gave so that they can equip you. And if you're one of the growing number of people who thinks that they don't need a pastor or any man teaching them or any man instructing them, if you're one of the growing number of people who feels that way, take it up with Yeshua. He's the one that set this in place. Well, how long did he set it in place? Well, let's read on. Verse 13. Till. So now we know how long. He gave apostles, prophets, pastors, evangelists, and teachers till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of Yahweh unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of the Messiah. Till we all come in the unity of faith. We're not there yet. Till we fully discern who Yeshua, the Son of Yahweh, really is, and until we become like him in every way, we're not there yet. So, Yeshua is still assigning apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Verse 14. That we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, speaking the truth in love, may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even the Messiah. So, why would Yeshua have me stay on that testing for 12 Sabbaths? Because his children are being tossed to and fro by the sleight of men who operate with cunning craftiness, lying in wait to deceive. Cunning craftiness means they're extremely, get this, they're extremely skillful at using fallacious arguments to deceive people. A fallacious argument is an argument based on a false belief. So they're extremely skillful at using arguments based on false beliefs to deceive people. There are men and women out there who have false beliefs, and they're extremely skillful at presenting that belief to make it look and sound like truth so that they can deceive Yeshua's sheep. Even though it's not truth, by and through their skills, they make it sound holy, spiritual, undeniable, and true. So, when a pastor is teaching on something over and over and over and over and over, it's because Yeshua is trying to equip you so that you can protect yourself and protect somebody else. The word in verse 14 translated children, be no more children, it means a non-speaking child. Yeshua does not want any of us to be in a situation where a cunningly crafty deceiver is attempting to deceive us or somebody else and we're unable to speak. That's what it means. A non-speaking child. So that's the reason it says, be no more children. Do not find yourself in those situations and be one who's unable to defend the truth. So that might explain why Yeshua and Yahweh would have me stay on it week after week after week. He wants us all equipped. Yeshua set it up this way because that's the way he wants it. If you want it a different way, and I understand that, but if you want it a different way, all you have to do is live a sinless life, die for the people, have Yahweh resurrect you, set up your own assembly, and set up your own rules. But right now, the assembly that's set up in the earth, he's the one who died for it. He's the one that Yahweh raised. He's the one that's seated at his right hand. He's the one that's been given all authority and all power. And he's the one that says, this is the way I want it done. And it's at his name that every knee bows, right? And at his name every tongue confesses. So, as a pastor, it's my duty to endeavor every time I stand before you to deliver what he wants me to deliver. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm able to do that 100% of the time. But I can assure you that 100% of the time I endeavor to do that. Yeah. I'm not taking polls to see what people want to hear. I'm not watching analytics to see if it's time to get away from a particular subject or to get on a particular subject. I have to do what I'm impressed that he has instructed me to do. So go back to our text in Luke 7. Because in this text, What Yeshua is doing is letting us know how important it is that when Yahweh sends somebody to us, we have the proper expectation when we encounter them. Do you hear that? Yeah. When Yahweh sends somebody to us, it's important to have the proper expectation when you encounter them. If your expectation is wrong, you're going to miss what Yahweh's wanting to get to you. So listen carefully to Yeshua. Concerning John, he asked the people, "What went you out for to see? A reed shaken in the wind." So I ask you, with your many years of being exposed to the Scriptures, was John a weak man who was easily persuaded to be silent, or who could be pressured into changing his approach? Was he? You're going to be silent? Of course John wasn't. So the point Yeshua is making is, if that's the kind of man you went out there looking for, you're going to be extremely disappointed. If that's the kind of man you expected or even wanted to find, then your expectation would have caused you to be unable to hear what John said, because you would have immediately been turned off by him. You were expecting him to be softer, more easily to contend with, right? The point is, we don't get to choose the characteristics that we of the man that Yeshua sends. We don't get to choose the characteristics that we demand that he has or she has. Yeshua chooses them. Yeshua equips them. Yeshua sends them. It's his choice, not ours. John was chosen and sent. He was not a reed. He was not a weak man who could be persuaded to back down. He couldn't be persuaded to calm down. He couldn't be persuaded to ease up. And he couldn't be persuaded to change the subject. His demeanor would bother the masses today. But search the Scriptures for me. Help me out. Show me one place that Yahweh ever used a weak man. Show me where Yahweh ever used a man who could be convinced by the crowds of what he could and couldn't say. Show me a man where show me a place where Yahweh ever used a man who was groomed by the people on the proper tone and delivery of the message. I've searched it and I can't find it. And those that Yahweh called were not soft-spoken, and they were not weak in spirit, weak in mind, or weak in body. What's the next thing Yeshua asked the people? What went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment. In Matthew, this exact same word is translated fine clothing. Soft raiment or fine clothing. The word translated soft and the word translated fine is the Greek word malakos. Malakos. There's one other place that, why don't you turn there, 1 Corinthians 6. There's one other place that Greek word malakos is used. So we're going to read two verses and you spot that word. Because it's used 3 times and 3 times it gets translated 3 different ways. Malakos. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 9. Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Be not deceived. neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. Where's the word malakos in that passage? There you go. Y'all getting very good at this. Matthew translated it's translated as fine, and Luke is translated as soft. In 1 Corinthians 6, it's translated as effeminate. To be effeminate means to be a man who does not possess manly characteristics. He doesn't have manly characteristics in his appearance or in his manner. Men are to have certain characteristics. Women are to have certain characteristics. When a man stops being manly, the Bible calls that effeminate. When a man is manly, the world calls that toxic. The Bible calls it correct. Now when you look this word malakos up in Strong's dictionary, Strong says this is a figurative word for a catamite. C-A-T-A-M-I-T-E. A catamite is an effeminate young man kept for homosexual practices or purposes. Malakos is a figurative reference to a catamite. So, Yeshua used that word on purpose in Luke chapter 7. He said, when you went out to the wilderness to listen to John, were you expecting to find an effeminate man wearing silky, fancy clothes? Did you expect to find a man that was primp, prissy, and all dressed up? That's the question. He's asking the people, is that what you went looking for? John was not a sissy man. He was all man. Listen carefully to verse 25. What went ye out for to see? Luke 7. A man clothed in soft raiment. Behold, this is Yeshua, guys. Behold, they which are gorgeously apparelled and live delicately are in king's courts. Gorgeously apparelled means splendid, noble, expensive clothing. To live delicately, do with this what you want, but it means what it means. It's a reference to a man who is effeminate. Yeshua uses this phrase to bring us back to that. It is a reference to a man who is soft or weak in mind and body. Yeshua said that such men are in king's courts. In other words, they work for kings. They don't work for Yahweh. Kings and denominations like men like that. You know why kings and denominations like men like that? Because they can be bought. Because they will preach what they're told to preach when they're told to preach it. Because they can be easily persuaded and easily manipulated. Kings and denominations and multitudes like those kind of preachers, but Yahweh does not. Yahweh does not have in his service men who are gorgeously apparelled and who live delicately. Now, am I saying that preachers who wear extremely expensive clothes and are soft and effeminate do not serve Yahweh? I'm not saying that. Yeshua did. Yeshua said it. What did he ask next? What went ye out for to see? A prophet? Then he said, yes. There you go. Now you're getting it. That was the correct expectation when you went out into the desert. If you went out there to see a man who spoke on behalf of Yahweh, you were not going to be disappointed. Because that's who John was, that's what John did. If you didn't allow yourself to become distracted by how he dressed, and you didn't allow yourself to become offended by how stern he was, and the tone that he used, and the manliness of his delivery, then you would hear a message from Yahweh. There are valuable lessons in this passage for all of us to learn, so I'm just going to go through a few of them here, 3 or 4. Lesson number 1. Do not allow yourself to be enticed by men who seem to have clout and wear the most expensive clothes and shoes. Do not allow yourself to be enticed by men who seem to have clout and who wear the finest clothes and the most expensive shoes. There are those who believe that that is a sign of their godliness. It's whether they wear a Rolex and wear Armani's and those kinds of things. Number 2, do not focus on the external aspects when you go before a servant of Yahweh. That is his clothes, his hair, his beard. Don't focus on the external aspects. Instead, just go expecting Yahweh to talk to you. It's strange, but I'm telling you, it's not strange, it's beautiful. I've seen it happen in my life over and over and over again that the pastor could be talking about something completely different than what I needed. But somehow or the other, there would be one sentence or one word or one something that would come forth from him, and he didn't even know it. But it was the answer that I needed. Don't focus on what on the subject. Don't focus on his appearance. Don't focus on his tone. Go there and say, Father, I'm expecting to hear from you, and you'll hear from him. Number 3. This is going to go over good. Number 3. Be wary of preachers who are soft-spoken. Being soft-spoken is good in general. Being soft-spoken is not a favorable, nor is it a required quality of the servants of Yahweh. In other words, you cannot be soft-spoken when you rebuke the wind. You can't be soft-spoken when you rebuke demons. And you cannot be soft-spoken when you rebuke false doctrine. So, number 4. Don't be offended by those who appear to be loud, harsh, or stern. Understand that if they were not that way, they would not be able to stand against the onslaughts they face. If that servant who appears to be stern didn't love Yahweh and didn't love you, he wouldn't keep doing what he's doing. His sternness is proof of his love. His fortitude is proof that he loves you. Because you understand it's easier and pays more to preach what people want to hear in tones they prefer to hear it. It's easier and it pays more. I heard a man and his wife at the gym talking about their experience on church on Sunday. And they were talking to another lady who attends the same church, but she attends at a different time. This is one of those churches, a mega church that has multiple services. And this man and his wife were talking about a guest speaker they had there that Sunday. And this man said, I didn't like it. The pastor needs to know that we come there to hear him. And he needs to be there. And this speaker that was there raised their voice too much and was too stern, and I didn't like it at all. That is the condition of the hearts of people that attend churches today. So what I'm telling you is, and this is a mega church, it's easier and it pays more to preach what people want to hear and to do so in the tones that they approve. And then you can be mega. Now, I don't know how people miss this, but they do. They've bought into the lie that the preacher is supposed to always speak loving, uplifting, inspirational messages. But again, Paul told Timothy to preach the word. And in that same sentence, the exact same sentence, he told Timothy, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, reprove, rebuke, and exhort, and have great fortitude when you do so. And he also said this about the word to Timothy. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, he said, all scripture is given by inspiration of Yahweh, and it's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of Yahweh may be perfect. There it is again, same message in Ephesians 4. That the man of Yahweh may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. So where does it say that the word has been inspired to make you feel good and feel inspired? What it says is, the word is there to tell you what to believe, to prove to you why you should believe that way, to correct you when you aren't believing the right way, and instruct you on how to walk out what you believe. Not to make you feel good. Whoo, I feel inspired today. No. That statement in 2 Timothy 3, that statement puts a whole new light on the question, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And that question is this one. Are you ready for the word? In other words, are you ready to be reproved, rebuked, corrected, told what to believe, told why you should believe it, and instructed on how to walk out what you believe? Because that's what the word's for, and it's profitable to you when a servant of Yahweh preaches it and teaches it to you for those purposes. It's profitable when a servant of Yahweh is telling you what to believe, proving to you why you ought to believe it, correcting you when you aren't believing it, and instructing you on how to walk it out. So, if Yahweh tells his servant to get on the subject and to stay on the subject until he says otherwise, it's for your benefit. You don't want a preacher who only preaches what you want to hear. Can you imagine telling John, will you please preach on something besides repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand? I'm tired of hearing it. Come on, John, preach on something else. Can you imagine telling Ezekiel, will you please get up off the ground and quit acting weird? And preach to us about how much Yahweh loves us and all the great things he's going to do for us? Can you imagine telling Peter, we need you to quit talking about false teachers and Sodom and Gomorrah. We need you to be more positive when you preach to us. It's unhealthy to come into any assembly and see a pastor as a content creator and expect him to produce content that you request or that you require. It's biblical to come into an assembly, see a pastor, and expect him to deliver a word from Yahweh that's needful for the body. He won't be perfect. He'll have his flaws. But if he's truly called, then he's been set in place by Yahweh. Be careful of being too critical. Be careful of being too cynical. Let me say that again. Be careful of being too critical. Be careful of being too cynical. I know that we all have been lied to in our past. From the pulpit. I know that we all have had to escape the lies and the deceits of Babylon. But we have to be careful that the enemy doesn't cause us to become so skeptical of everyone that we cannot receive from anyone. What do I mean by being too cynical, too critical? Did they not say of Yeshua, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? That's being too cynical. Did they not say of Yeshua, isn't that Joseph's son? Didn't they say of Yeshua, that man's a glutton. He's a wine bibber. He's a friend to publicans. Do you see the danger of cynicism and skepticism? If skepticism becomes too much a part of your personality, you'll find yourself not only rejecting those that Yeshua has sent to you, you'll find yourself rejecting Yeshua himself. It's this type of skepticism and cynicism that makes some skeptical of Paul to this day and cause them to say all kinds of evil things against him. Yeah. Can you not read the scriptures and see how skeptical, how wrong they were, but how skeptical the people were of Moses, of Jeremiah, of Isaiah, of Amos, of Hosea, of Malachi? You know, Yeshua said this. He said, so persecuted they the prophets that were before you. Who is they? You ever stop to think about that? So persecuted they the prophets that were before you. Who is the they that persecuted the prophets? The they are those who were so religiously dogmatic, they thought they didn't need prophets telling them anything. And they were able to pick the prophets apart, find fault with them, so they didn't have to listen to them. They were skeptical and cynical of anybody that Yahweh sent to them, and therefore with ease they rejected them and persecuted them. What went ye out for to see? Why did you come to hear? Why do you listen on Facebook or YouTube? If your hope is to find a man who will take requests from the audience on what he should preach, you're going to be sorely disappointed. If your hope is to find a man who will be a reed shaken in the wind, who will comply with whatever the majority wants done, it's not going to happen. If your hope is to find a man who would avoid subjects you'd rather not hear about, or who will only briefly touch on them and then move on, it's not going to happen. If your hope is to find a man who's weak, prissy, soft, and sissy, and who dresses exquisitely, it's not going to happen. But if it's because you believe that Yahweh called me and Yeshua sent me into the assembly to perfect the saints, if it's because you believe Yahweh will speak to you through me, then may that be so. And let me close with this. If this message made you feel the least bit uncomfortable, and if you don't see why we had to do this, and why we couldn't have just continued on with our study of Enoch today, keep this in mind. All I did today was preach the word. Everything I said to you today was biblical instruction on the expectations we should have when we assemble together. If it wasn't in there, we wouldn't need to hear it. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. As his name is put upon you, so shall he himself bless you.